Well, thank you. This has been just a wonderful time to just really take the alternative look to how things can be seen in a different perspective when you step back from the issue and see what truly is going on. And with that, you know, as we are listening to, over time, the UN, environmentalists, many of the politicians around decrying how we need to do something to control our climate. And they're talking about decreasing poverty at the same time. But the UN wants to keep people in energy poverty. Without energy, they are in massive poverty. And this doesn't, and so they're not allowing the developing countries to continue to develop on a reliable energy sides. And the issue just lends itself back to keeping children and women and families oppressed in these countries that are trying to move forward, because they are indoctrinating our children in thinking that there is something needs to be done on this climate change issue. It is an important message that we are forgetting or is being lacked to talk about by the UN, and that is the lack of energy and leaving women and children around this world in poverty because of it. So, as we look at this, we also are hearing, and at least out of North Dakota, the leave it in the ground mantra. And my little girl, she likes to play outside and enjoy the fresh air of North Dakota. And so out in our farm area, she is running and enjoying the clean, safe water and air of North Dakota. Yet I am seeing other farms around us being bought out for wind towers and these types of things, taking up precious farmland for growth of food. And so they're wanting to shutter up these coal plants. And so what we need to do here is to reverse this trend and talk about the truth of the fossil fuels and carbon dioxide, and understanding that there are 6 of 7 human beings in the underdeveloped countries, over 6 billion people that are left living in poverty with no access to energy services, and are left to determining factors of their economic and human development. 1.3 billion people do not have access to electricity. Now, I'm not talking about not being able to flip a switch to turn on a light or open the refrigerator. They have no electricity at all. Societal electrification by coal in the United States was the greatest engineering achievement in the 20th century. Access to energy has increased lifespans, improved our health and living conditions wherever reliable energy is available. Caring for the poor includes the children having the ability to learn. In these impoverished countries, little girls do not get to go to school. They are left to carry water and find something to burn for food and to cleanse that water. We have carbon-based fuels at an 80% mix. To change that, as you have seen over the course of the following previous speakers, that we are at a no way to be able to change that the way the UN is asking for. We are headed in a slow climb, and it will not keep a steady grid if you see the mix just within the United States as to how energy is used. And so the consumption rates and how we do it, the mix doesn't work for where they want to head in all of this. So with that, what do we have? We have natural gas and we have petroleum. And what happens when we take a look at what they are ignoring and what these fossil fuels provide for us in everyday living? Fossil fuels are responsible for, as I said, increasing our lifespan, for infant and child mortality. And in the 18th century, if we think about this, life expectancy was 25 years. Today, it is around 80. So what do we need natural gas and petroleum, these fossil fuels, for? We need them for shelter, heating, cooling. We need them for our everyday uses, for lighting, for transportation, our computer uses, our household chores, and cooking. Thinking about it from the perspective of a woman and the freedoms that it brings to me, just the simple things, two simple things, having a refrigerator, freezer, and a washer, and a washer dryer for my clothes, frees me to go out into the work field if that is what I choose to do. Without that, I am impoverished into the care and nurturing only in the one area of life. So with that, what we have is the United Nations Educational and Scientific and Cultural Organization has come in, and where we have countries that have stepped up and said, we would like to put in a coal plant, and this man wanting to go back to having a job and making money to provide for himself, his family, for the people around him. The government of Bangladesh put it up, had the financing ready, and wanted to build this coal plant. And they are still planning to by 2022, because it's just taking way too long to get this going, because they've had to deal with lawsuits and people stepping in, such as this UN organization, who have stood in opposition of these countries having access to reliable energy through various lawsuits, through various statements. And now in 2019, though, they did finally put out a bid to start seeing coal brought in. So that's going to be a real challenge, and there is also the fight to stop that from happening. And so we'll see. But thinking about this, in India alone, 40% of the fruits and vegetables will be spoiled due to lack of refrigeration every day. That's nutritional food that is gone. And these are people that are hungry and having just the basic access of one coal generating plant up and going could save these lives, make things nutritional, keeping their water cold. Think about that. When they're living in 100 degree consistent temperatures without being able to cool their water, you're talking about having to work in the heat of the day because there's no light at night. So it's so counter to what they really need and what needs to be done. So fossil fuels deriving the energy could improve the human well-being across the world as necessary conditions in this industrial revolution that we take for granted. Fossil fuels unleashed sustainable, productive, and economic growth and advanced human condition everywhere else. Why is the UN depriving this country? This woman talks about, I need power. I need the ability to clean my food, to clean the clothes, to care for my children, to refrigerate my food. She wants this, and yet, at last count, we have 27% of the Bangladeshi people having no access to electricity, none. Power outages are common. Hydro is coming online, but it is not generated to the rural areas where this is needed. These coal plants need to be built, and they are stopping these people from this opportunity. When electricity is added to their lives, grains can be grown through water utilizations through irrigation, through fertilization, so that they can be sustainable on their own. Through equipment being added for sewing machines for women to become entrepreneurs and move out of poverty, for cold storage, for feeding their families. People are able to make money and move and save it and move out of poverty. Schools are necessary, and schools will benefit from electricity. With students having time, they will be available to study at night and attend school. Kenya signed an agreement with China. They wanted to build a coal plant. They had a $2 billion deal. Things were ready to Power Global was ready to put it together through the financing. The deal was signed and they were taken to court through the UN, and they are hoping to still move forward. They're pretty much so just saying we're going to do this. But more than 1 billion people are being blocked from access to electricity due to the UN policies and their actions. Lack of electricity in their homes, their businesses, their communities, and their schools, stopping the development and transition to social and economical freedoms. Electricity allows people to lift themselves out of poverty through education and healthier lives. If Al Gore has his way and the other environments, things will get worse. But this is where we lack the electricity in these countries. Working together to light the world instead of saying that the only way that we can do this is through the renewables. We are not working together. We are hurting the women and children around the world. Children should not be stuck in a poverty level without clean water. They deserve access to the freedoms and basic needs as everyone else does. Clean, fresh water, sewer systems, food, fresh food, fertilizers, pesticides, heating and cooling, clean, safe homes, places to cook the food. Children everywhere deserve the best things possible. Instead, we're headed down a slippery slope. Now let's look at this slippery slope of seeing that CO2, as we are being told, carbon dioxide is harmful, yet we know it is helpful in ways that can be helpful. To them, they call it a pollutant. To us, we know it is vital to life. A 2-degree mantra of the environmentalists would set us back to 1870, where that would be where we're at the 0.7 tons of CO2. Well, what was life like for the woman in 1870s? They had no home refrigeration, there was no electrical washing machines, and there was no freedom. Women and families in developing countries are still living that way. History shows us that the breakdown of this energy sources to get back to what they're calling for would take us back into the 1870s. Taking the coal off of there and making it renewable is the percentage levels. So back to wood and coal is where they want us in decarbonizing the world by 2040. We are nowhere near that ability, technology speaking, and it takes everything offline. So when we break it down, we see that the renewables cannot help us to replace this. I hope that we will all have the land to start growing your own trees, because you're going to have to start burning them if they have their way. In the residential consumption, as you look at that, you see where we use ours and the significance of, and at first I looked at it and I went, well, gee, those are small percentages, but when you add up the things that you have to, that are just necessary in life, you're already at 75% before you even get into the smaller things of conveniences. Agricultural-wise, an industry that is heavily relied on of fossil fuels to produce the food we eat. Plants need CO2 to grow, and animals need plants to live and grow. The fertilizers and the machinery is dependent on the fossil fuels. Because we have more CO2, we are seeing the greening of the earth. CO2 helps plants grow. This demonstration that was done shows us that CO2 is the building block of plants. We have activists that want to say that it's time to decarbonize the food we eat. So in saying this, we have in the agricultural industry, Brent Newell, a legal director of the Center for Race, Poverty, and Environmental Studies, goes on to say here, it is a real shame that the industry, referring to agricultural industry, continues to enjoy an exemption while others are forced to comply. Decarbonizing what we eat is as important as decarbonizing what we drive or what we will use to heat our homes. Well, this little guy is not an SUV. He is a necessary part of the food chain. Cattle do digest their food, and while they chew their cud, they do multiple times through their stomach systems and produce gases as they do so. Eating beef has become and being seen in the environmental circles as the new SUV. Strictly as an American indulger, says John Sutter of CNN, he wanted to tell us through his time on some ranches as he walked around and checked out some beef, to tell us that we need to now eat less beef and maybe not have beef at all. It's claiming this is going to save the world. So with that, they go on and they talk about production of the grains. Well, rice provides food for approximately 3.5 billion people, but it releases methane. Well, that's their headline. My headline is a little bit different. Rice produces and releases methane, and it feeds 3.5 billion people. Keeping it in perspective, the words matter and how they use them. In the medical field, fossil fuels are used. It's a part of building and having hospitals that run and emergency services that are available on a reliable grid 24/7, 365. They are used in the disaster reliefs, in medications. The Women's Health Organization says that a woman dies every minute from complications of childbirth or pregnancy, and these deaths are attributed to the lack of electricity and lighting, healthcare, and facilities. So what do we get from these fossil fuels dealing with the medical professions? We see that it is necessary throughout the whole system and how important they are to making sure that we have good access to medical care. This is interesting because the environmentalists praise natural gas at times, and yet they are also waiting to ban the fracking of nat gas and have done so in some of the states. And in this process, they want to eliminate coal, and now they will be going after gas. So I think that's interesting in the whole perspective of things when the UN had said the first thing they want to do is utilize this to relieve poverty, feed the world. As you can see, they're countering themselves in everything that they have tried to put forward. The health benefits of advancing of fossil fuels are well known for refrigeration, for our medical needs, for our standard of sanitation, for the heating and cooling in homes, and for water availability. So let's look at transportation. Let's see how far we will go in the farming industry of feeding the world, to going places in our cars and trucks when we need to get places, and getting things delivered when it absolutely positively has to get there overnight. How do our goods and services reach their destinations? How do the emergency services get to where the people are and when it is needed? Or when it comes to transportation, everybody being moved to the electric car. The dangers from batteries, encouraging children, child labor for rare and precious metals. Amnesty International has done a tremendous amount of research on this, and actually I found some great footage from CNN going into these cobalt areas and finding these things. But I find it so ironic that we were told, stop using batteries so much, find an alternative to throwing away batteries, and then they tell you to do the rechargeable battery, and now then all of a sudden we're going to run on battery-operated cars. Well, I'm not supposed to use a battery in my flashlight. I'm supposed to but I'm going to put it in my car. There's so many ironies there. I just don't even want to go into it. But this was, I thought, such an interesting thing. So we're going to have the electric car, and here's this charging station, but it's backed up by fuel generators. So I'll let that stand on its own. It says it all. But here's the part that tears at my heart, and that is that because we want to have batteries and because we want to move to this so-called renewable type thing, we are putting children down mines, and we are putting them in some of the worst conditions possible. Yet remember, their number one thing is that they want to take people out of poverty and have healthier living conditions. This is not the way to do it. This is costing children their lives. This young man is down in the mine, and he's in the Congo here, and these miners are dying to feed the world's hunger for electric cars. That's what this is about. These children are dying because of our so-called hunger for electric cars. They are exploited by numerous organizations, and this coming from Chinese firm. This particular mine was backed by a Chinese firm, and they had workers in this mine as young as 9 years old being put farther down these mines after these guys would dig these little holes and send them down there to come out. In the CNN footage that I had reviewed on this, if the miners saw the cameras that were supposed to be hidden, they literally, right on film, beat some of these children to get them out of the camera area to prove that they were not using children to mine. So where will we go? Will we go back to foot power, or will we allow fossil fuels that are the only reliable, safe way to travel do so? I don't plan to have a solar or wind-driven car or jet. I certainly don't plan on flying in one anytime soon. So the importance of the fossil fuels allow us for many of these things, and that being great societal moving forward. And it's not just these things. It's not about things. It's about the freedoms that come with it, the everyday activities that we count on and work on. The positive stories about carbon-based energy are not being taught to our kids. They're being indoctrinated in false doctrine of renewable and the world collapsing because of an energy issue and carbon dioxide poisoning. It will be an unforgivable thing because we are losing a generation to these lies. In developing countries around the world, women are harmed the most. They are left in energy poverty. They are paying the highest price. Things that we take for granted, as I've talked about before, washing of clothes, sanitation, drinking of water, lighting, and healthcare, are all lost for these women around the world. Refrigeration of their food and sustainability of nutrition. All the labor-intense work that goes into self-care and care of their families is left to the burden of the women, and they lose out on freedom. They have no economic choices. They have no freedom of moving up in the world. They are left impoverished for their lives. On the other hand, on any given day, there are more than 130 million girls that do not get to go to school. They are facing these barriers of attending school because they are left to care for their families. They are left to collect the water. They are left to collect the necessary things to heat their homes and help. They cannot access this education without education, they can't move forward. And it's the girls that get stuck at home doing this. Their education would provide the opportunity for these kids to learn, to grow, to become empowered, and to lead lives that are worth living. The social benefits of the fossil fuels will be lifting billions of people out of poverty, reducing the negative effects of this, and to allow them to have the freedoms that need to be done, that they should be allowed to have. Freedom is what this is about. It's freedom for families and communities, for the poor, the elderly, the developing country, the women, the children, the girls. It's about food, it's about heating, it's about medical care. It's about having a home. We have access to safe, clean land and air and water. We have these things. Everyone else deserves the same. In conclusion, decarbonizing this world and forcing decarbonization on the developing countries is harmful to women and children. There is no consensus saying that 97% of the people think that we need to decarbonize. There is just no way, shape, or form we can live and move forward without fossil fuels. It is critical for the livelihood of billions of people. So we need to look. Is it a sunset or is it a sunrise? I'm hoping this world is still in the time of a sunrise, not letting it set on the poor and the women and the children. Thank you very much. Be blessed in your travels home.